Part 175. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 1746. I didn't mean to offend you. Archmage Heinz shouted at the top of his lungs. Not only shouting, he also tried his best to mobilize his strength. The bone-white robe opened, and the 19 ghosts on the robe whined, and their heads poked out from the dark black robe. Hold on. Hold on, ah. Give me a moment, give me a word. Just one sentence. Allow me to defend myself. Allow me to defend myself. He thought that he had tried his best, and he thought that he had used his greatest strength, and his voice was broken by shouting. However, under the golden light, he only heard the sound of blood rushing in his ears, the sound of his vocal cords beating, opening and closing, almost tearing, and the sound of air blowing out of his nose and throat. Apart from that, he didn't hear his own shouts, nor the shrill screams of the ghosts on the bone robe. As soon as the golden light fell, they retracted one by one, or in other words, were pressed back into the bone robe. Among bursts of black smoke came out of the deep black robe, and the ghosts screamed heartbreakingly, obviously being severely injured in the sun, but the screams only echoed in the meditation world of Archmage Heinz and could not be transmitted at all. Not good. That does not work. I need to get my voice out. I have to let the sun god know. I have to make it clear, it's not that I want to claim the Virgin of the Sun, it's not that I want to offend the gods. It's not me. This is not my idea. I'm just conveying it. Conveying it. Great Sun God, I have no intention of offending dash. Archmage Heinz shouted at the top of his lungs. While shouting, he tried his best to spread his mental power, and used the vibration of his mental power to express the same meaning. Under the light of the sun, you may not be able to shout loudly, but your spiritual power will definitely convey it. Since the sun god is a god, his sense of spiritual power must be much more sensitive than that of humans. However, spreading spiritual power is not that easy. Especially for high-level mages of the necromancy system, under the light of the sun, their mental power almost feels like walking naked into the flames. Pain. It hurts so much. The pain spreads from inch to inch, and the pain spreads from foot to foot. What's even more frightening is that the mental power that I have worked so hard to temper, under the light of the sun, is almost like black snow under the scorching Sunday. As soon as it is revealed, it melts away. But you have to shout. If you can't shout, you will be killed. While Archmage Heinz was cursing in his mind, Langel mistook me, and Langel, this idiot, you should ask it yourself, he was shaking his mental power and shouting at the top of his lungs. Scream by yourself, and let the ghosts and undead creatures help you shout. Don't consider things that will kill you in the sun or lose your precious ghosts. Survive first. However, even with all their efforts, the gap between demigods and high-level mages is still as big as a chasm, making people fall into despair involuntarily. The mental power pushed out an inch, and was pushed back. Then pushed out another inch, and was pushed back again. Every time he was pressed back, part of his mental energy was burned away, and his head hurt as if it were being driven by 100,000 steel nails. It's still burning red. From the sun disk, the golden sunlight surged out, covering him and illuminating the entire hall. In the peripheral vision of Archmage Heinz, he saw the king of the kingdom of the sun and the waiters serving in the hall, all kneeling on the ground with their foreheads pressed against the ground. Obviously, no one can speak for him, no one can help him. You can only rely on yourself. However, you can't rely too much on yourself. Endless light and heat descended on the hall and on him. It's as vast as a mountain, like a sea, like a sword. Gradually, the ghost melted, and the bone robe went from smoking to burning, and was finally torn off by Archmage Heinz and thrown away. Under the white bone robe, 2 or 3 defensive magic weapons tried their best to support it, but they could not stop the bright golden light from penetrating through the clothes and shining on the body. Pain. Every inch of skin hurts. The exposed skin has begun to turn red, black, and blistered. The skin covered under the clothes has also begun to tremble violently, causing more pain. Many necromancers will become more and more undead during the advancement process, and their bodies will be saturated with the aura of death. This is especially true for Archmage Heinz, who is halfway to the legendary realm. The elementalization of his body is almost the process of death. He only has one last step and the last leap before he can transform into a lich like the immortal. However, such elementalization and immersion made him feel extremely uncomfortable in front of the divine light of the sun god Virakaka. The sun's rays are the most powerful, and the most restrained to the breath of death. Not only is it restrained, but it is also counteracting and burning. Archmage Heinz was miserable. Not only his mental strength, but also his physical body was crumbling like a snowman under the scorching sun, feeling like it was about to melt. No more. It really doesn't work anymore. I have to save myself, I must save myself. If I am not a half-step legend, if I am a legend, if I become a legend, then, under the light of the sun, I should be able to hold on for one more moment. Moreover, legends and non-legends are different. Even in the eyes of gods, legends are immortals, and gods will take a high look at them. Those who fail to reach the level of legend in one day will be regarded as ants in the eyes of the gods. But how to advance to legend, how to ascend to legend? Archmage Heinz slowly closed his eyes. Lift your head, open your arms, and fully expose yourself to the light of the sun. From the top of the head to the soles of the feet, from the surface of the skin to the depths of the internal organs, every inch, every minute, is being burned by the sun. The breath of death inside the body is entangled and fighting with the sunlight, constantly retreating and disappearing into nothing. After so many years, so much hard work, step by step, from mage apprentice to half-step legend, all the accumulated strength is melting away like boiling water and snow. Archmage Heinz didn't care, he just concentrated on it wholeheartedly. If the skin is hurting, then the pain is gone. If the muscles and bones are moaning, then moaning is good. If the mental power is screaming, then the pain is gone. With this leap, we must do our best to cross the legendary barrier. In fact, he has accumulated enough. That's enough. The mental power has been accumulated to the limit. If there is any more, the meditation world cannot hold it. Elementalization, the impregnation of the breath of death, has reached the extreme. If it is a little more, if there is no qualitative change, it will die directly. In the study and research of magic, all that can be learned has been learned, and those that can be studied, except for those that have no clue yet, have been thoroughly studied. So far, he is only one step away. Gather all the spirit, unify all the strength of the body, and take that step towards the other side of life and death. He just didn't dare. I have never dared. If he doesn't step out, he will be a 19th level archmage, a half-legend, standing at the highest level below the legend in this world. With his lifespan, although he will not live forever, it is not difficult to enjoy it for another 50 or 100 years. Step out and either become a legend, or become an ignorant undead creature, or simply the breath of death rushes back and becomes a corpse. Being buried in a grave, or becoming a skeleton, corpse witch, or other tool-like existence controlled by colleagues and juniors. And the likelihood of success. Likelihood of success. From the beginning of Archmage Heinz to today, he has seen not 10 but 5 necromancers who failed to challenge the legend. Even, the dark gold skeleton in his hand was inherited from his fellow disciple. This is inheritance in the true sense. The body after the failed attack on the legend is left behind for the juniors to use as waste. But now, there is no room for hesitation. If you rush, you will die. If you don't rush, you will die. Give it a try, and if it succeeds, you might still have a chance to survive. Archmage Haynes' heart gradually calmed down. The golden light covering his body, the physical pain, the pressure of the gods, everything was regarded as nothing by him. He no longer even tried to speak out, no longer tried to convey his innocence to the sun god, but focused on remembering the experience of impacting the legend in the sect. Don't be afraid of death. If you are afraid of death, you will die. You have to accept death in order to live. Think carefully about why you want to live. Think about why you want to live and why you seek eternal life, even if it is immortality. Open your arms and fall towards the river of death. If you accept it, it will embrace you and hold you calmly. If you don't accept it, if you struggle desperately, it will drown you and swallow you. Don't come back, don't come back, don't come back. Don't forcefully awaken the dead, even if it's your closest relative, your most beloved, even if it's yourself. Don't try to cross the river of two deaths. In this world, you can only keep moving forward. Archmage Haynes didn't understand. He had never quite understood before. When a person dies, he is dead, and when a person dies, there is nothing. Why accept death first? After death, what else awaits him? However, the sun shrouded and the golden flame burned. The skin carbonized, the muscles contracted, and the bones creaked and cracked. Maybe he is going to die soon, maybe he is already dead. What will the world be like after death? Just like His Excellency the Immortal, what kind of power supports him to stay in this world? Golden light penetrates the body. Archmage Haynes felt that he had become transparent and was about to disappear from this world, but at this moment, the endless world unfolded in front of him. Death is another way of living. Death is part of this world. Only those who want to stay in this world, not for hatred, not for fear, not for greed, but to accept their own death calmly, but still want to stay in this world, can stay. Those who fear death cannot become legends of the dead. Those who hate the living cannot become legends of the dead. Only those who purely want to explore the mysteries of the world and walk firmly on this path can cross the river of death. Die to life, live to death. Only knowledge and the mysteries of the world can support an immortal and stay in this world for a long time. In an instant, black flames burned everywhere. Burning through his skin, burning through his muscles, burning through his bones. When the black flames dissipated, a skeleton as black and shiny as black jade, with golden light scattered all over it like golden sand, slowly raised its head. The upper and lower teeth of the skull clicked and clicked, making a dry and crisp sound. Amidst the knocking sound, even more stable mental power fluctuations came out. Great Sun God Virakaka, I have no intention of offending you, I am just conveying a request to my colleagues. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 1747. Chapter 1742 Sun Virgin is my daughter, my wife, you need to pay more, monthly ticket add 7 more. The golden light stopped. It is very magical. There should be no stagnation of light. Unless it is blocked, it will continue to shoot forward. However, Archmage Haynes, now perhaps should be called the Legend of Haynes, clearly felt the stagnation of the golden light. When it shines on the body, it doesn't hurt at all, and there is no longer any burning sensation. Moreover, there seemed to be a circle of light around him, allowing him to stand effortlessly and safely. Thank you for your generosity, Great Sun God. Legend Haynes breathed a sigh of relief silently. The golden light disappeared and simply disappeared, as if it had never appeared. At this time, the king of the Sun Kingdom got up in embarrassment, his face covered with sweat, and the healthy bronze color on his face faded to pale. He wiped his sweat and stared at Haynes speechless. After a long time, he said, You, how can you blaspheme like this? Scared to death. That is the great Father God. He is the supreme God of the entire Sun Kingdom. Just now when the golden light filled the room and pressed him to the ground, he almost thought he was going to die. He's going to be burned to death by the sun's light? In the history of the kingdom, there were indeed kings who were burned to a crisp by the light of the sun god, but it was because they were obsessed with lust and forcibly defiled the Virgin of the Sun that they ended up like this. He just listened to a request. Sorry, I didn't mean it. I didn't mean to blaspheme. Legend Hines quickly apologized. Of course, the sincerity in the apology was a bit lacking in the king's eyes. I just don't know, not in the temple, not in front of the priest, just asking like this will make the sun god angry. I am not asking for myself, just for my compatriot, a legend. My god knows everything. I know everything, the king angrily accused. Wherever the sun shines, nothing can escape his perception. Got it, so next time we want to talk about something that might offend the sun god, we have to do it at night, in a grotto dug deep underground. It would be best if there are no emblems of the sun god or anything related to the god in the room. Heinz Legend silently memorized this rule and put on a smile without much skill. I was the one who offended you before. Can you tell me how to calm the anger of the great sun god? Of course, blurted the king. Just as he started to speak, he suddenly stopped and turned his head to look outside. Legend of Heinz turned his head and turned his skull to the side as if listening. He only heard the bells ringing outside, one after another, one after another. The king could not help but stand up and listen to the bells, with a look of shock, even fear, on his face. The bells ring continuously, from the outermost part of the palace to the inner hall where guests are received. Door after door opens suddenly. The footsteps were chaotic, and the large group of people went straight into the palace without anyone even stopping them. The king stood up and stood aside, staring at the dazzling team. The high priest held a long golden staff, and the sun disk on the head of the staff emitted brilliant golden light, striding at the front. But he did not walk in the middle of the road, but turned slightly to the left, as if to lead the way for those behind him. Behind him, a sun virgin with long golden hair hanging down to her knees, holding a sun disk made of gold in her hands, exuding full of divine power, walks solemnly in the middle of the palace road. After that, there are younger sun virgins, high-level priests, mid-level priests, and low-level priests. Holding feather fans, fly whisks, golden bowls, and various ceremonial guards, they lined up in two long lines and followed the sun virgin at the front, as if they were just showing off. The king had given up his throne and even took a few steps back to stand almost against the wall. Legend of Heinz did not retreat, but took a step forward, turned to face the high priest and sun virgin. The sun virgin's long hair hung almost motionless behind her back, not flying at all as she moved forward. In her deep black eyes, faint golden light spots danced, echoing the golden light on the golden disk. Everything only shows one thing. Virakaka, the sun god, is about to descend on this Virgin of the Sun. The Virgin of the Sun kept walking, walked to the front, and sat down proudly. After a pause, a loud and majestic voice came out of her mouth. You who have crossed the boundary between life and death, are you the one who has the audacity to say blasphemous words? I have no intention of offending the great sun god Virakaka. Hearing the sun god speak, Legend Heinz felt relieved and said loudly. I am merely passing on the request to my colleagues to prevent the desecration of your majesty. I also privately asked your ruler on earth whether such a request was appropriate and whether it could be uttered. If you are offended by this, could you please allow me to withdraw all requests without saying a word? Well. The golden light in the sun virgin's eyes swayed. After a long while, she, or he, raised her hand and pointed to a guest seat next to her. Sit. Thank you for your generosity, great sun god. Legend Heinz bowed slightly and sat down sideways. Virakaka, the sun god, continued. You are a person who has crossed the boundaries of eternity. You are qualified to speak in front of me. Come on, tell me, what does that colleague of yours want to do? Khan, the previous judgment was indeed correct. Only people who have crossed the boundaries of eternity, in other words, legends, can be looked down upon by the sun god. In other words, they will not be regarded as ants. Hein's legend wiped away the sweat in his heart that did not exist and could never exist again, and said seriously, "It's like this. My colleague, a person who has crossed the boundaries of eternity like me, wants to have a child. Because he is extremely powerful, ordinary women cannot give birth to children for him, so he hopes to ask for the Virgin of the Sun." Well, the Sun Virgin's eyes showed no fluctuation, and there was no trace of pity for herself in her expression. It was obvious that her self-awareness had been suppressed to the lowest level by the Sun God. Do you know who the Virgin of the Sun is? Virgin of the Sun is your priestess and the basis for your coming legend. Of Heinz bowed his head slightly and answered respectfully. The Sun God snorted unhappily. More than that. They are my daughters, my wives, and the mothers of my divine descendants. Now, do you still think that the Virgin of the Sun can be obtained? Hey, hey, what kind of chaotic relationship is this? Only by silently saying this is the new world, this is the new world in his heart, legend of Heinz can suppress the messy complaints in his heart. Not only can we not talk about this kind of thing, but we can't even think about it. If the fluctuation of mental power is leaked even a little bit, the demigod can kill several legends of the glorious Holy See, but can't he kill a new mage legend? He could only continue to answer respectfully. That's it? Such a request is really rude. I suggest that you ignore Langer's offense. If your anger still persists, I am willing to claim compensation from him on your behalf. You. Compensation, Sun God Virakaka's voice was a little more interesting. Since you want to claim compensation on my behalf now, why did you make a request to me on his behalf before? Couldn't you just refuse? You know, after all, I haven't crossed the boundary between life and death before. Heinz legend tried his best to use skulls and skeletons, and non-existent vocal cords to express the sorry message. I couldn't reject him outright. But now, I am on the same level as him, and I have suffered a great loss because of his recklessness. Bone Robe. 19 high-level ghosts. There are so many precious collections. All destroyed. His own life and death are on the line. Langer must compensate for these losses. Definitely have to pay. Since you want to claim compensation, why not use the pretext of appeasing the anger of the sun god to simply claim a large sum of money? He did offend me severely, Sun God Virakaka said in a calm voice, without joy or anger. However, if I want to pick up something, I will definitely pick it up in person. In this case, I will leave for a while. Wait, Legend Heinz almost jumped up. Great Sun God. How noble and holy you are, there is no need to worry about these trivial things. And Langer didn't mean to offend. He didn't want to blaspheme your saints. He just wanted to ask for something in their bodies. Oh? Tell me. Legend Heinz took a breath and carefully organized the language, describing the definition of eggs, the method of retrieving eggs, etc., in a way that was as accurate and detailed as possible without angering the sun god. Thank God, he has been paying attention to the most cutting-edge academic developments, and has not skipped any of Master Nordmark's papers. Virakaka, the sun god, listened silently, his eyes focused, and his golden light barely flickered. For a long time, just when Heinz felt that he was at a loss for words and had nothing else to say except scolding Langel, he finally heard Virakaka's question. You mean, this method comes from the Master Nordmark who once came to the Kingdom of the Sun? Is the transfer here? Legend Heinz was surprised and happy, and nodded quickly. The sun god said lightly. Mage Nordmark has dealt with me. Since it is his plan, it is not completely unfeasible. However, that cannot be given to the sun virgins. Even letting mortals touch them is blasphemy. So, Heinz legend opened the eyes belonging to the skeleton. The sun god continued speaking leisurely. However, it is not impossible to talk about those who are training to become sun virgins and have not yet been selected. Well, since that Langer said that he is willing to pay a price that satisfies me, let him pay the price first. As she spoke, the golden light flashed, and the golden light in the sun virgin's eyes faded away. It was obvious that the sun god had released the Advent mode. Legend of Heinz took a long breath, exchanged greetings with the high priest and the king, and hurriedly said goodbye and went back. As soon as I returned to the Mage Tower, I sent a message to the Immortal Lord, immediately dialed the communication on Dragon Island, and roared back with great momentum. Langley. You compensate me. You old boy must compensate me. For your son Virgin, I have suffered a huge loss. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Giolan 2020. Chapter 1748. Another legend. The 22nd legend. Everyone in the Magic Council, from the legends stationed in Nevis to the review committee members responsible for specific policies and projects, were all laughing. The bright skull of His Excellency the Immortal is wearing a black robe, like a rag rolled up by a typhoon, running from the top of the Sleepless Tower to the top of the Tower of Babel, and then around the Tower of Babel, spinning around and around. Their necromantic system is legendary. There is a third legend. He can finally travel around without being tied to Nevis. That old guy has been hiding in the cracks in the plane of death and refused to come out to replace him no matter what, so that he couldn't leave and had to sit down at Igor Peak. Tomorrow, let Heinz come back tomorrow. I will leave as soon as Heinz arrives. I want to go to Dragon Island, I want to go to Dragon Tomb, I also want to go to the Black Forest of the Vampire Clan, I want to walk around and see. The other legends rejoiced. A necromantic legend, although his frontal combat effectiveness may not be particularly strong, mainly because he is too restrained by the radiant magic, but when it comes to causing trouble, he is too strong. Just walk around, create a death canopy here, summon the undead there, even if you don't need a trick like plague, you can still make the enemy restless. By the way, do you want to announce it? There are already 22 legends. It doesn't seem to be very interesting to hide it anymore. People will always see it in the distribution of benefits. Or, save some more? There have been 4 more legends in the past few years. After another 10 or 20 years, maybe the council will have 24, 26, 28, or even 30 legends. Take it out, how cool it is. The necromancers on Dragon Island also rejoiced. Although not one of their group has advanced, they have gained a legend in the necromancy system. Hey, speaking of it, Archmage Haynes, no, Legend Haynes, has dealt with the Lord of Plague before? In the Eagle Country, did you help the Plague Lord run the research institute? Then, he ran to the Kingdom of the Sun and took over the Mage Tower that was built by the Lord of Plague and handed over to the Crown of the Sun? Your Excellency, Lord of the Plague, is such a lucky star. We have decided, we must hug the thigh of His Excellency the Lord of the Plague. Wherever he points, we will hit. Didn't he want to decipher the secret of dragon reproduction? Let's work harder. Find all the cloning alchemy warehouses, use them all, and study how to cultivate dragon eggs. Only Legend Lundgren was unhappy. No, he should be very unhappy. On the light screen projected by the tower spirit, a black jade-like skeleton filled the entire screen, with its upper and lower teeth clicking, clicking, clicking. Langley, you have gone too far. I almost got killed by you. Did you know that I almost died? My white bone robe. My 19 high-level ghosts. My 3 pieces of 8-ring equipment. My 2 dark gold skeletons. All destroyed. All completely destroyed. It's all you. It's all because of you. I just said a word for you, and the sun god almost killed me. You have to compensate. You have to compensate for all of this. No, Heinz, do you want me to pay for all of this? Langer Legend feels like his scalp is numb just thinking about the difficulty of compensation. The key is that there is also the life of a legendary mage, who narrowly escaped death. This cannot be solved with just one piece of legendary equipment. Let's do this. I'll give you 2 pieces of legendary equipment, 3 pieces. 3 pieces is fine. He stared at the 2 faint soul fires in the skeleton and quickly changed his words. As I said before, if you help me do this, I will give you a piece of legendary equipment. Together with the compensation, there will be 3 pieces in total. That's enough. I really can't afford any more. 3 pieces. Are you kidding me? Legend of Heinz was furious. My bone robe is at the quasi-legendary level. 19 high-level ghosts have all been promoted to the 9th level. Coupled with the Chain of Greed, the Ring of Winter, and the Belt of Shadow, these 3 pieces of 8-ring equipment, as well as 2 dark gold skeletons, are worth a piece of legendary equipment. Hello. Lundgren Legend Headache. Legend is legend, and it is very different from equipment below legend. 9 rings are quasi-legendary. If you want to accumulate a legend based on quantity, you are kidding. But now they are talking about compensation. Facing the furious Heinz legend, he could only nod reluctantly. If you say it's worth it, then it's worth it. In addition to helping you negotiate, you give me a legendary equipment, which is already 2 pieces. Is my life only worth 1 legendary equipment? That obviously can't be done. How many do you want? If 1 piece of my equipment is broken, I will be compensated with 2 pieces. Then, if I almost die, I will be compensated with 20 pieces. Just ask the Immortal Lord if he has 10 pieces of legendary equipment. I already have 10 pieces of belongings on hand. In exchange for 1 life, 20 pieces are enough, right? You might as well go and grab it. Langer's voice broke. 20 pieces, even if you squeeze all the bones out of me, you can't squeeze out 20 pieces. No. I don't even have that many materials in my hand. 5 pieces at most. 5 pieces in total including compensation and remuneration. That means my life is only worth 2, Heinz continued furiously. Do you want to pay? If you don't want to pay, I'll ask His Excellency the Immortal to come to you and ask how many pieces of legendary equipment the life of a necromancer legend is worth. I really can't get it out. The materials I have are only enough to make 5 pieces. I still owe Lady Philby. Otherwise, I will deprive you of hers first to make it for you. Speaking of Mr. Philby, Heinz was really vague. One is that he can't beat her, as thunder and lightning are too restrained against undead creatures, and the other is that she is the senior sister of His Excellency the Lord of Plagues, she always has to look at her face. He sank deeply and roared in a low voice. 5 pieces is absolutely not enough. You don't have enough materials on hand. You can deliver the goods in installments, or you can borrow money from the Parliament. If you still refuse, I will ask His Excellency the Immortal to ask His Excellency Jade Crown. Maximum 5 pieces. 1 more piece is not allowed, and it must be delivered in batches within 3 years. If you don't agree, there will be a fight at worst. You can go directly to Long Island to fight with me. If you win, I will listen to you. If you lose, I will fight. Listen to me. Ha ha ha. I don't have to come to fight with you. If you don't agree to compensate, then you don't want the Virgin of the Sun. I'll tell the Sun God directly that you don't want to compensate. If you have the ability, you can kill her to find her. Me. Hey, we have something to discuss. Langer Legend's expression changed drastically. After a heated exchange of words, the two sides finally settled on the compensation for 8 pieces of legendary equipment. Among them, Langer Legend spent his own money to make 3 pieces, and Heinz provided materials to make 5 pieces. Then, as an apology to the Sun God, he will be compensated with 3 pieces of legendary equipment, and the Sun God will provide the materials. As for how to make money in this process, and how to take advantage of the Sun God to make equipment for his own family, Heinz is very familiar with this kind of thing, and he doesn't need anyone to teach him at all. Well, on the day when the first batch of legendary equipment is in place, the 3 preparatory Sun Virgins will board the airship and be sent to Dragon Island. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 1749. Taya stepped into the temple slowly and forcefully with even steps. Behind her, a small group of girls followed cautiously, almost on tiptoes, until they followed into the main hall, forming a small square. After they stood up, several groups of girls were led into the main hall by the Virgin of the Sun. Soon, there were 5 square formations and more than 100 people lined up in the main hall. At the front of the hall, the high priest was wearing a complex embroidered robe and holding a long golden staff. He was always calm and serious. It wasn't until the girls lined up that he coughed and shouted. The great Sun God needs you to make contributions to him. He needs you to dedicate your bodies, your lives, your future and honor to him. There was a small commotion in the group of girls. Some people tightened their alpaca wool belts, some turned their heads left and right, watching the movements of the sisters, some subconsciously shrank back, wanting to retreat to the end of the line. Unlike these black-haired girls, Taya straightened her back and walked forward with her head held high. Her long golden hair fell behind her, like a golden cloak covering her. She is the goddess of the sun, a goddess who has received divine grace, been infused with divine power, and has withstood the coming of the Sun God. Her identity is different from the girls behind her. What's even more different is that she once stood up for the sisters in the same temple, rushed out of the temple with a spear, rushed in front of the high priest, and even presided over the sacrificial ceremony, complained to the Sun God, and got the Sun God's attention and support. Respond to. After such an experience, Taya was transferred to the capital and sent directly to the main temple in the capital. Of course, there is more than one sun goddess in the capital, and even the sun goddesses in the capital are basically princesses with strong divine blood and daughters of great nobles. Tia's status there was not high and she was not taken seriously. She was soon thrown into the maiden's house to teach the preparatory service of the Sun Virgins. Teach them sacrificial etiquette, teach them various prayers, teach them how to make food for the gods. In addition, some preparatory Sun Virgins who have passed the preliminary training must also be taught to weave the lightest and softest alpaca wool, spin yarn, dye it, and weave it into clothes, cloaks, statues, and curtains. The most important thing is to teach them to fight with sticks and spears, use stone knives to slit the throats of sacrifices, and take out the hearts of sacrifices to worship the gods. Taya turned her head slightly, paid attention to the girls she was leading, and made a comforting gesture with her backhand. Like a peaceful ripple passing by, the phalanx gradually became quiet, and slowly spread to other phalanxes. The high priest stared at them silently for a while, and after the entire phalanx fell silent, he said loudly, "You will leave the temple, leave the kingdom, and go to places far, far away. You will lose your identity as a virgin of the sun, lose your noble status, and even lose your chastity and be forced to belong to other men. The only thing you will not lose is God's blessing for you. The Sun God will remember your dedication, and after your death, your souls will enter the kingdom of God and live forever as the concubines of the Sun God." He said something, and there was a commotion of fear below, and another word, and another commotion of fear. By the time the high priest finished speaking, the young preparatory virgins were already trembling, and most of them sobbed softly. "I do not want. I don't want to leave dash. Can I not go? I was chosen here just to become a virgin of the sun. I would rather die on the altar as a sacrifice than belong to another man. There was even a 10-year-old girl who had just been elected to the temple, crying loudly. She. Mom, mom, mom. As soon as she cried, the entire phalanx couldn't hold on any longer, and the cries came one after another, almost overturning the roof of the temple. The high priest looked at them with a straight face. Among the phalanx, some girls looked calm. Most of them were the king's princesses or the daughters of great nobles. They did not believe that they would be thrown out. There are also some girls who look panic-stricken. They are basically the children of remote and small nobles, and the possibility of becoming a virgin of the sun is very small. If you are lucky, you will be given to a warrior in the kingdom, or become a beauty in a noble house. I'm not lucky, maybe it's a human sacrifice. Reality is so unfair and fate is so cruel. The high priest endured it, and endured it again and again. Seeing that these girls were crying uncontrollably, he finally used his golden staff and shouted loudly. That's enough. No matter who of you goes, you are making a contribution to the sun god. The sun god will bless you. He will not forget you. Now, everyone under the age of 14, please exit the hall. There was a rush of footsteps. The girls who were crying for their mothers, as well as some younger girls who were crying in fear, all left impatiently or were dragged out by others. In the end, only about half of the girls were left standing there, quietly waiting for their fate. Those who have not yet learned combat skills, please exit. The high priest looked around and continued to order. After a while, half of the people left, leaving only about 20 girls. This time, the high priest was finally satisfied, nodded, and breathed out. Very good. The great sun god needs 5 devotees, chosen from the preparatory sun virgins who have not yet received divine grace. Who is willing? Who volunteers to stand up? Nobody. No girl would voluntarily, or dare to voluntarily, face such a terrible fate. The high priest didn't think twice and directly named him. Lottie, Fina, and Wulu. Every time a name was shouted, a girl fell to the ground silently. The high priest's face was calm and he didn't even look at their reactions. On the left and right are the daughters of some small aristocratic families and noble families in remote areas. One more and one less, what does it matter? None of them showed the extra grace of the sun god. I was about to order the 5th one, but suddenly there was a young priest outside the door, rushing over in small steps. After whispering a few words next to the high priest said in astonishment. Are you sure? This is no joke. Confirm. This is the oracle that was just issued, how dare I forge it? Since it is an oracle, there is nothing to shirk. The high priest took a long breath and looked at the blonde sun goddesses at the front of the team. The great sun god needs a sun goddess to dedicate himself to him. Who is willing? I do. As soon as she finished speaking, Taya took a step forward and raised her voice. More than half a month later, Gretel was surprised to see an acquaintance in the queue of sun maidens coming off the airship. Taya, why are you here? Why did the sun god send you here? The extra debt has finally been paid off, I'm so happy. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 1750. I responded to the sun god's oracle and dedicated everything I had to the sun god. Tia smiled slightly, looked solemn, and nodded slightly to Gretel. However, Gretel felt that she did not see herself. Her dark brown eyes, which were once full of warmth and determination, were now a cold and dead gray, and even her smile was only ceremonially cold. Gretel noticed that her long golden hair had faded to black, and even the golden light in her pupils had disappeared. He couldn't help but ask. Your hair. The great sun god has taken back his divine power, Taya replied softly. I left the temple to dedicate myself to the great sun god, however, it is impossible to be the basis for the coming of the god. Moreover, women like us who may be defiled cannot withstand the power of the gods. Greet was sympathetic. He himself doesn't care about faith. Whether he has divine power or not, it doesn't make any difference to him. Maybe it would be more convenient not to have divine power. But for those priests, those virgins of the sun, from a very young age, he was sent to the temple, trained, and brainwashed. Perhaps, for them, faith is everything, divine grace and divine power are everything. Being abandoned by one's own God, or in other words, being betrayed by one's own God, for them, it should be a subversion that cannot be described even if the world is shattered, and a pain that cannot be described even if the heart is broken, right? It is torn from the past life, torn apart, skinned and boned, denying everything. He didn't want to give much comfort. He just arranged for these sun virgins to stay and asked Anavia to take 2 female natural priests to conduct physical examinations for them. It mainly evaluates the warrior level and caster level, as well as development status and health. By the way, let Anavia popularize basic medical knowledge for them, especially the basic knowledge of the reproductive system. After all the preparatory work was completed, they were invited over. Accompanied by Anavia and a female magician, he explained to them what they needed to do here. In general, we need to take out the mature eggs in your body, pair them with legendary level sperm, and study the development of legendary level fertilized eggs. You don't have to meet the legend directly, it will be Ms. Anavia who performs the egg retrieval surgery for you. From this point, you can understand that you have not been defiled by men. The eyes of several reserve sun virgins lit up. Wu Lu, who was the youngest, had the most delicate hands, and was said to have the highest birth among all, subconsciously asked. Then can we still go back? It depends on the will of the sun god Virakaka. Gretel did not dare to give a positive or negative answer, but just went around in circles. However, we can't talk about going back at least until the experiment has achieved results. This may take a long time, such as several years, more than 10 years. Wu Lu opened her mouth and lowered her head, tears welling up in her eyes. Holding his hands in front of his chest, he was almost about to pray to Great Father God when a sneer suddenly sounded from beside him. We can't go back. We can't go back. Wu Lu, don't you understand? We were sold. We were sold here. The 5 of us, together, sold the price of an artifact. What we sold will not be redeemed. It was Tia who spoke. Her eyes were intense and her tone was angry. Wu Lu cried, wow. Then what do we do? Yeah, what should we do? How will you spend your days in the future? How do we feed ourselves? Among the 5 girls, the 4 reserve sun virgins cried one after another. Sob quietly, shed tears silently, or sniffle and ask in a low voice. They were sent to the temple when they were 5, 6, 7, or 8 years old. Apart from the skills in the temple, they knew nothing and knew nothing. After traveling thousands of miles away, the temple no longer wants them, the sun god no longer wants them. What will they do in the future? What I said before was that I might give birth to a child for a man. Now, if I don't even have to see that man, who will raise them? What will they do next? They were empty-handed and brought nothing except the clothes they carried. They could only weave alpaca wool and cook food offered to the gods. There were not even alpacas in this place, not even the plants they were familiar with. In the kingdom of the sun, even if they are not sun virgins, they will become the wives of nobles and warriors. In short, there will always be someone to support them. From the moment they left home, from the moment they stepped off the airship, they have been worried until now. At this moment, as Greet's narration, their fears finally broke out. As experimental assistants, the legend who wants children, promises to support your lives. Gretel sighed and said softly. Legend has a long lifespan, and it is not difficult for him to support you for life. If the experiment requires it, and if any of you are willing to personally conceive children for him, he promises to give you better treatment in the same way as the mother of the child. The frightened tears of the four little girls gradually stopped. Gretel saw two girls moving their lips slightly, possibly saying "I do." He didn't understand the pronunciation of the local language of the Kingdom of the Sun very well, and Language Master didn't translate lip reading. However, Taya, who was sitting in the middle of the five people, snorted softly. "Apart from this, is there any other way we can go?" Of course Greet immediately turned his eyes to her. "All you need to do is cooperate with the surgical egg retrieval once a month, or once every few months. Apart from that, you have a high degree of freedom. What do you want to do?" "Is it okay if I want to be trained?" Taya raised her head proudly. "I used to be the sun goddess. According to your assessment, I am a level 8 female warrior. I still have at least 5 or 6 levels of mental strength. Even if the sun god takes back his divine power, these still belong to me. I want to be an independent adventurer. Is that okay?" Gretel smiled. At this moment, the girl in front of her was as dazzling as when the power of the sun descended on her and dyed her long hair golden. In other words, the brilliance of humanity was even more dazzling than the power of the sun. At this moment, the former sun goddess in front of him reminded him of a historical book he once read. Zaojun has been in the palace for several years, but he has not been able to see the emperor. He is filled with sorrow and resentment, so he asks Yeting to ask for help. Hu Hangzi is about to bid farewell to the assembly, and the emperor summons 5 daughters to show him. Zaojun is rich and beautiful. In the bright Han Palace, Gujing he wandered around, moving around. The emperor was shocked when he saw her, and wanted to keep her, but it was difficult to break her promise, so she had 2 sons with the Xiongnu. "I don't want to serve you anymore. I'm leaving. The world is so big, it is rare to have such an opportunity. I want to pursue my own life." He stood up and moved forward, extending his hand to the brave girl. "I heard that you asked to come here? Welcome. Of course you can receive training, there are the best teachers here. As long as you cooperate with the experiments on time, the rest of the time belongs to you, and your life also belongs to you." You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geolan 2020. Chapter 1751. As long as you are willing, it is always easy to learn something. The teaching resources here at Greet are very abundant. Ashmoon Song is willing to teach Taya martial arts. In addition to spears, there are also long knives, scimitars, bows, and arrows. And, how to walk briskly in the forest, how to identify roads, animal tracks and animal nests, how to find water sources, how to pick food. As an elf who has lived a 3-digit life, if she opens up to teach, Taya will never be able to finish learning even if she wants to die. What's more, Anavia also brought her common language textbooks, magic textbooks, and elementary magic knowledge textbooks. With the language proficiency ring generously presented by the Legend of Change, Taya learned new languages and characters with even greater strength. During the day, he practiced martial arts and walked in the woods, and at night, he read and learned to read, keeping himself busy. In addition, when she has a little free time, she also gets into the kitchen to help the dragon relatives who serve the magician cook and learn local cooking techniques. Help Anavia take care of the experimental animals, feed the experimental animals, clean the cages. For preparatory sun virgins. We are here to provide eggs and cooperate with research. Besides, don't we have someone to support us? The legend who asked us to come here, or in other words, bought us here, promised to support us for the rest of our lives. We don't have to worry anymore in this life. Taya persuaded them earnestly. What others give is what others give, and what is yours is yours. It's rare that you are here and can live the life you want. You have to learn something and do something. Persuading and pulling at the same time. Among the 4 girls, Lottie was taught by her personally, and Wulu was the youngest, but these 2 were obedient. Fina and An had no intention of obeying. It's so tiring to work. It's so tiring to practice martial arts. It's so tiring to study. Finally, someone can support us, so why bother working so hard anymore? That's right, I'm going to eat, sleep, eat, and enjoy myself for a while. Why can't I have a good life and practice martial arts until I'm covered in sweat, and my feet are muddy when I step on the wild ground? Taya tried to persuade her once, twice, or 3 times, but the 2 girls didn't listen, so they could only shrug their shoulders and go do their own thing. She can't control it. Langer legend only needs to ensure that people are alive and healthy, and nothing else. And greed doesn't force it. Everyone has their own ambitions, and whether they are willing to control their own destiny or be a ruthless egg provider is their own choice. And all he can do is remind Ashmoon Song. Control the intensity of their exercise. I seem to remember that too much training will also affect the menstrual cycle for them. Providing eggs is still their first priority. Oh, I know, Ashuej waved her hand carelessly. Don't worry. For a strong person like me, I can tell what their physical condition is like at a glance. I will never let you go wrong. 5 women can provide 10 mature eggs each time under the magic of fertility. In other words, 50 eggs can be used in a month. Therefore, Gretel had enough research materials for the first time on the subject of legendary reproduction. Ah! So cool. I have never fought such a rich battle. I can finally start researching without worrying about running out of materials. Sperm and egg combine, 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 combine. Greet lay down under the microscope and stared hard. A large number of sperm rush towards the egg, one by one, they freeze and die one by one. Finally, one successfully rushed in, and then, the transparent zone outside the egg began to change its characteristics. Phew, thank God, the egg is finally fine. Greet let out a long sigh of relief. Perhaps this is because there is a huge difference in size between sperm and eggs. Perhaps it's because the distance between a legend and a low-level professional is not so great that the acrosome enzyme released by the sperm is too strong and directly kills the egg. Well, next, the sperm and egg combine to become a fertilized egg, and then divide for the first time. Work harder. Work harder. Work harder. Copy, 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 copy. Greet lay in front of the microscope, clenched his fists, and muttered. 10 test tubes and 10 eggs are lined up and placed in different energy environments. This batch, Greet set up to power the cells, are electrical pulses of different frequencies. Based on your own understanding of electrical pulses and cells, as well as the amount of electricity output and estimated frequency previously output by the senior sister, set a rough range, and then, within this range, set different frequencies and intensities. 2 eggs served as a control group. 8 experimental groups were divided into 4 groups with different frequencies and intensities, and experiments were conducted separately. Then, all Gretel can do is observe, wait, and pray. Copy, 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 the copy must be successful, the copy must be successful. Fortunately, as the master of the Mage Tower, he has almost unlimited resources. For 10 test tubes, there are 10 microelectron microscopes to take pictures, and enough tailing computing power is allocated to produce pictures immediately. Gretel only had to sit there and wait, and he could see the chromosomes dividing and replicating, and the chromosomes slowly joining together to form a dot, and then the golden light slowly flickered. On the light screen painted by the tower spirit, numbers continued to dance. Copy success 15%, 18%, 19%, 22%. The number of successful copies of extraordinary points is 1, 5, 11, 12. In fact, Gretel could do nothing, adjust the electric pulse, and go to sleep directly. It takes 8 hours for a human fertilized egg to divide once. He waited until the division was complete and checked the data directly on the Tower Spirit Center. However, Gretel was still jumping up and down nervously when he did this experiment for the first time. From the number 1 microscope and electron microscope to the number 10 microscope and electron microscope, and then from the number 10 microscope and electron microscope back to the number 1 microscope and electron microscope, I kept looking at the screen and looking at the values. Work harder, work harder, work harder, hey, okay, this point has passed. One more. Oh, this point is not extraordinary, but it is still copied. Without the extraordinary, there would be no extraordinary. Anyway, the babies born are usually mortals, not even apprentices. Oh my God, why is this egg turning black? Why is it turning black? It's shrunken. It's going to die. Why on earth? Ah! This egg exploded. Could it be that the electric pulse was too strong and burned out? Who told me how to measure the temperature of an egg? How to check such a small one? Is it related to the preservation liquid? Or is it related to the temperature? It should not be the case. The alchemical liquid used in cloning is used to preserve eggs. The effect is still very good, and there are no bacterial problems. Ah, how many times do I have to try? It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 1752. First month. In the first round, the experiment with 50 eggs was completed. The best performing group replicated 35% of the progress. Well. Greet rolled around holding his head. Judging from the process of egg death in the group with the best performance, there should still be insufficient energy and insufficient replication, requiring a large amount of energy supply. So how to supply energy, how to supply, if the supply is just a little bit more, the egg wall will be broken, and then it will be over. Greet was extremely depressed. The higher the level of the mother, the more energy the egg has, and the higher the support for replication. The best performing group had eggs, not surprisingly, from Tia, the former sun goddess. But it's obviously not enough. If it is conceived directly in the mother's body, maybe it can be a little better? Can the mother's body provide support for the fertilized egg? Gretel thought this and shook his head. It's not yet this step, he thought, it's not yet the step of trying to implant the fertilized egg into the mother's body. The human body has its own barrier, which is responsible for the survival of the fittest among the offspring. Fertilized eggs that are too weak will be eliminated by the mother and will not be able to develop to the implantation stage. This is why, when doing in vitro fertilization, the fertilized eggs must be cultured in the test tube until the third or fourth day before they can be sent to the uterus for implantation. If you can't even do the first division, then it's better not to try to let the mother's body carry out pregnancy. What's more, giving birth to a child is a huge burden on the mother. For a transcendent woman who is training and improving herself, the child will absorb a huge part of her energy. According to what Greet heard from MSX Laban at the baby-friendly medical clinic, it is considered good if the mother's level does not decline during the pregnancy of a child. This is still a spellcaster. Their energy basically comes from mental power. It is not easy to transfer it to the fetus, and a lot of it can be retained. If it's a warrior, it's even worse. Ashu Isang once said that once a warrior becomes pregnant, a layer of strength in the bones of a warrior will be reduced, and the muscles will also collapse. For a female warrior who is at the peak of a low level and is on her way to the middle level, giving birth to a child, including pregnancy, breastfeeding, and recuperation, will take at least 3 years before she can return to her original height and reach the top again. How many 3 years can a person have? How long can a low-level professional or a mid-level professional stay full of vitality and energy? 10 years? 20 years? If you cannot become a knight when you are young, you will almost have no hope after the age of 35. If you cannot become a great knight, your energy and blood will gradually decline after the age of 50, or at most 55. The caster will be better off, but if the physical drag is too heavy, it will also affect the caster's advancement. Therefore, almost all high-level female spellcasters in the Parliament are single, and all female legends in the Parliament are single, without exception. As long as there is a slight possibility, Gretel does not want to hinder Tia's efforts to improve herself. After all, the endocrine fluctuations caused by egg cell production once a month are already quite a burden for these girls. So what should we do? How can we more effectively supply energy to the fertilized egg and supply energy to the specific points of the chromosomes in the fertilized egg? On this topic, Greed made countless assumptions and tried them one by one. Since the senior sister can help him light up an extraordinary point with just a wave of her hand and a bolt of lightning penetrates, the first thing to try is of course the electric pulse method. High frequency. Low frequency. High pressure. Low pressure. Hey, speaking of which, I previously suspected that the existence of super energy points was because the electrons of a certain part of the atoms in the chromosome entered the transition state and remained in the transition state. Moreover, this guess has been recognized by the world's gifts and can be considered correct. Greed bit the barrel of the endless ink pen and thought hard. That is to say, the pen holder is a mid-level magic equipment. Otherwise, he would have bitten the feathers long ago. The problem is, how to keep it in the transition state and keep it in the transition state. In other words, is there any way to prevent the electrons staying in the high-level orbit from falling back to the lower-level orbit? Greed tried hard to recall the knowledge taught in medical physics. Thanks to the editor of the textbook, and also to the teacher, for explaining the transition principle quite thoroughly. The particles that make up matter can have different energy states, also called energy level states. The lowest energy state is called the ground state, and the other energy levels are called excited states. The energy level changes of particles are collectively called transitions. The transition of particles between energy levels is inevitably accompanied by the process of exchanging energy with the outside world. There are two ways for particles to achieve transitions between energy levels: absorbing or releasing energy in the form of light energy, which is called optical radiation or radiative transition. The absorption or release of energy in the form of non-light energy, such as heat energy, is called a non-radiative transition. If you want to prevent the electrons staying in the high-level orbit from falling back to the lower-level orbit, you must add energy to it. Add energy in various ways. The premise is that the various energies added cannot burn the precious fertilized eggs, cannot denature the proteins in the fertilized eggs, and cannot penetrate the cell membrane of the fertilized eggs. Or, Gretel remembered what the teacher said with a half-smile in class. From a macro perspective, it's okay. As long as a bunch of atoms are dense enough, the photons released by one atom will definitely hit the low-energy electrons on another atom. Then, the electrons on the other atom will be excited again. Ah, is this the case? How dense do these atoms have to be? Do they have to be packed together? Is it a neutron star? A white dwarf? At that time, he and his classmates were whispering and discussing. The teacher leisurely admired their struggles and calmly said, "That's right, I'm talking about plasma." "No, no. Teacher, plasma, what a terrible thing it is. That thing is a river and a mountain on the ground, and a sun or star in the sky." "Ah, I'm wrong, it's a star in the sky, a flame on the ground, or a welding arc ejected from a spray gun. I can't create small plasma structures one by one in the chromosomes, right?" Gretel continued to roll around holding his head. "That is to say, there is no second person in the laboratory, so his image is completely lost and he can do whatever he wants. He rolled back and forth twice, and suddenly sat up. Etc. Among the extraordinary points, what is it that emits golden light and can be seen by others? If it keeps emitting golden light, it means that its electrons are constantly in the transition state and keep emitting photons, or other things. Maybe, it's just a small plasma structure? I can give it a try. Test it and see. It doesn't matter if you test it. Speaking of which, even lasers with spot diameters at the micron level can form optical tweezers to transfer certain cells in a targeted manner without harming other cells. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 1753. Chapter 1748, Verification of Plasma State. Senior sister, can you just help me observe it? Greet began tinkering with his experiment again. There is no way, there are only 5 batches of eggs every month, and each batch of eggs can last less than 8 hours. Even taking into account the subsequent observation of experimental records and the determination of the reasons for experimental failure, the experimental time for each batch of eggs was less than 3 days. There is still more than half of the time free. Therefore, Greet had a lot of time to experiment with various experiments he thought of and verify various possibilities. Even the incredible idea that there may be plasma in the extraordinary point cannot be verified. Of course, how to measure something like plasma, or how to define it, is another matter. Gretel couldn't do it on his own. He first raced against time and caught his senior sister while she was on her way to fight in Sky Dragon City and doing various experiments, and asked her to help her sense. Senior sister, what is the difference between flame and other material forms? Of course they are different. Philby gave Gretel a strange look. The difference is huge. The flame is beating, it is hot, and it will never stop before it burns out. Why do you ask this? Well, you can read these books, A Preliminary Understanding of Flame, The Nature of Flame, and Fire. Greet felt his head hurt when he heard the titles of these books. He had seen these books in the library at Thunderhorn, that is, he had seen them before. A qualified magician of the evocation system, especially a qualified magician of the flame direction, has read these theoretical books and can recite them backwards and forwards. At the very least, when Brother Baebo taught him magic, he also mentioned these books, and even mentioned what is wrong, where is the knowledge that needs to be updated, where is it, I have a more accurate opinion. However, among these books, the latest The Nature of Fire was also written 50 years ago. 50 years ago. 50 years ago, electrons, atoms, and molecules were not defined in the magic world, right? Senior sister, that's not what I want to ask. I want to ask you to help me explore the material in the flame, its molecules, atoms, electrons, and the way the electrons move. Are they different from other materials? Well. Philby narrowed her eyes slightly. Silently, her mental power expanded and submerged into the flame. At the top of the alcohol lamp, the light blue flame beat silently, blazing, violent, and turbulent. It is different from the alcohol in the lamp belly, different from the surrounding air, different from the gas simply heated to high temperature, different from any other substance. The way atoms move, the way electrons move. The molecular motion of high-temperature gas is very fast, very, very fast. At the same temperature, the molecular motion in the flame is much faster. Philby concentrated on it, stroking the flame inch by inch with her mental power. It must be said that every time Gretel gave her an idea, it always gave her a new understanding. But electrons, weirdly, there are many more electrons in flames than in high-temperature gases. Those electrons keep scurrying around and flying around. If we say, a piece of metal, a piece of ice, or a mass of air, most of the electrons in them are quiet. Only when current hits it, will the electrons move with it. Then, in the flame, there are many discrete electrons flying around. The electrons are no longer bound around the atoms, but are suspended outside the atoms and evenly mixed together. Just like a raisin bread, all the raisins were shaken off the surface of the bread and dug out from the inside of the bread. Then, it was suspended around the bread, being shaken vigorously by a pair of hands, and jumping up and down. Interesting, very interesting, they are very active, they are constantly releasing energy. Philby's eyes grew brighter and brighter. She raised her hands and suddenly pulled out an electric arc, jumping between the index fingers of her left hand and right hand. After analyzing this method of movement, I feel that it is easier for me to control lightning. By the way, little Gretel, why do you want me to see this? Senior sister, you just remembered? Gretel stood by the side with a bitter look, covered from head to toe with all kinds of defensive magic to prevent him from being accidentally swept by his senior sister. When he heard the senior sister's question, he quickly raised a smile, swipe, and took out a few pieces of jade. Inside the jade, there are all spell configurations that he imprinted with his mental power, which are the configurations that the senior sister discovered using her mental power to scan the extraordinary points. Senior sister, please take a look at these spell configurations, as well as the physical existence methods in the spell configurations. Are they the same as the flames you see? Do you want me to see this? Well, little junior brother, you still need to continue to practice your mental power. Your senior sister and I are at your level. At my level, you can already use your mental power to directly feel the electron flow, I know, Gretel said with a smile. I know, senior sister, I have been practicing every day, give me a little more time, experiments and research cannot be delayed. Senior sister, can you help me take a look? It just depends on your progress, otherwise I won't care about you. Philby's mental power has penetrated into the jade, and she is satisfied with the delicateness of those tiny dots that represent the imprint of mental power. Well, outside the spell configuration, the way matter moves is indeed different from inside the spell configuration. Inside the spell configuration, it is more active, there are more electrons beating outside. No, there are a lot more. That's right for you. They are indeed similar to flames, their electrons are more active. So what? So senior sister, please help me take a look at the chromosomes, the extraordinary points in the chromosomes. Are there electrons also in a free state like this? You really think about it all the time. Philby gave her junior brother an angry look, and didn't do anything, just closed her eyes and stood still. Gretel slowly opened his mouth. Inner vision? Are you using your mental power to explore your body? I was already prepared. Prepare the somatic cells of the dragon clan, prepare the microscope and electron microscope, and prepare for the senior sister to explore the extraordinary points in a targeted manner under the guidance of the microscope and electron microscope. Senior sister, just look at yourself. He didn't dare to move, he didn't even dare to breathe again, for fear of disturbing his senior sister. After a long while, Philby opened her eyes, raised her head, and raised her hands. A ray of lightning flashed from her fingertip. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geolan 2020. Chapter 1754. Authentication was unsuccessful. In other words, existing means cannot be verified successfully. Greed was crestfallen. Alas, this possibility is unsuccessful. Next, we still have to grind slowly. However, seeing the senior sister in high spirits, muttering this direction is very interesting. Changing the output power to this form should increase the intensity a lot. Strange, why is this happening? And walking out, he still hurried behind. Call. Senior sister, How are you doing with your experiment where you illuminated a metal plate to excite electrons? Ah, that, I'll think about it, think about it. Philby's steps became faster and faster. It was also a time-consuming research that required very high processing accuracy of the equipment, and she is still dealing with changes to this day. Being asked about it by Gretel, I felt a little guilty. However, let Greet put it this way, shining a metal plate can excite electrons, whose essence is to provide energy to atoms. So, by providing energy to atoms in other ways, electrons can also be excited. Light is a kind of wave. Lighting an alcohol lamp will generate heat. The heat is transmitted in the form of infrared rays, which is also a kind of wave. By extension, isn't the electric arc she pulled out also a wave? Visible light, invisible light, and electromagnetic waves are, in the final analysis, all kinds of waves. You can have some fun here. By the way, little Gretel Philby suddenly stopped and said, "My use of lightning to light up extraordinary points on chromosomes is also a certain use of radio waves. Of course, I control it with legendary level mental power. If you want to simulate it, slowly find the required frequency and intensity, and you should be able to. It is okay." "Thank you, senior sister." Gretel smiled bitterly. Once he finds the required frequency and intensity, he certainly knows that this path is likely to be successful. The problem is, this is too difficult. By the way, if you really have no clue, why don't you try your spiritual power? Yes. Greet suddenly cheered up. Mental power is also a kind of electromagnetic wave, as he proved before. Using a Faraday cage, or a silver hairnet similar to a Faraday cage, can limitly shield the magic control spells, such as charm, shock, intimidation, etc. This proves that mental power is also a kind of electromagnetic wave. On this basis, the magicians of the control department have done a series of research. The magicians headed by Rose of Philosopher Almaden not only measured the properties of electromagnetic waves such as mental power, but also discovered that for different magicians, his/her mental power is composed of different electromagnetic wave frequencies. When the same magician advances to different levels, more frequencies will appear in the spiritual power lines. When the same magician releases different magics, the apparent mental power, frequency, and intensity will be different. So, I just need to test the spell that directionally charges the chromosomes. What kind of wave is it, and what is the frequency and intensity? If you say do it, do it. Targeted strengthening of chromosomes is a job that Greet is familiar with. Isn't it limited wishing technique? Of course, there are many variations of limited wishing. The same spell will take on different forms in the hands of different magicians, or to achieve different purposes. However, Gretel has used limited wish technique to perform targeted chromosome enhancement or chromosome shearing on intelligent creatures. He is already very familiar with it. Come on, come on. Another group of people. Let's set up the magic array. Set up the measuring instruments too. Hurry up. Speed. Greet was beaming. Anyway, he was already very familiar with the magic circle modified using limited wishing technique, and he quickly set it up. Next, magicians from the control, conjuration, and plasticity systems entered the scene one after another. According to Gretel's request, a set of measuring instruments was set up. Stay close to the experimental subject and measure the energy properties of the limited wishing technique when it reaches the experimental subject. What kind of wave is it? What is its frequency? How strong is it? Is the magic circle ready? Ready. Are the measuring instruments ready? Ready. Is the alchemy warehouse for cultivating fertilized eggs ready? Ready. There was wind at Gretel's feet. Of course, he only needs to give the order, whether it is to retrieve eggs, sperm, let them combine into fertilized eggs, or install various instruments. There will be people running around. Until the last step, Greet personally presided over the process. This was the first time he was so sure, and he felt that he was very close to success this time. A small jewelry box was delivered to hand. Gretel picked up a diamond and walked forward in small steps. Limited wishing technique. Make a wish to help the fertilized egg in the test tube divide successfully. Every time it divides, the chromosomes, especially the extraordinary points, can be successfully replicated within 3 to 4 days. A cell cluster with 100 blastomers will naturally form and enter the blastocyst stage. He concentrated on conveying his needs in as much detail as possible. The magic array shone brightly, and the powerful magic power of the 8-ring spell flowed. Finally, a small light group was formed, covering the fertilized egg in the test tube. Gretel waved his hand, and the magicians next to him rushed forward like wolves and tigers. Measurement. Measurement. Measure the properties of this wave. Ah, the waveform is so messy, so complicated. Get closer to the test tube. Get as close as possible. The closer you get, the better you can avoid interference. Is there too many radiation sources in this room? Should we reduce a few? Push out the irrelevant people first. They are all high-level mages, and their mental power is intertwined and stirred up. What a powerful radiation source it is. If you want me to say, you should put a protective shield on the outside of the test tube to block clutter, and then insert the probe of the test instrument into the protective shield, right? Anyway, limited wishing technique always has the ability to achieve its own goals. It makes sense. Mage Nordmark. Mage Nordmark. Immediately, someone hurriedly opened the improved Faraday cage, someone modified the probe of the testing instrument, and someone modified the test tube rack so that it could be properly fixed in the center. Gretel waited quietly in the laboratory, waiting for the group of archmages, experimenters, to finish their work, then picked up the second diamond and walked forward. Limited wishing technique. The limited wish-making technique is always unfavorable. At the very least, it has overcome the previous difficulties and successfully allowed a fertilized egg to safely divide to the blastocyst stage. Next, Greet sought the advice of Legend Langer and moved the small blastocyst into the cloning alchemy warehouse. Do you want this child? Yes, I can afford to support one more anyway. The alchemy warehouse ran quietly for 2 weeks, and a newborn baby was gently held out by a pair of hands. Success. The only thing missing is the dragon clan. Well, I haven't figured out what kind of wave it is yet. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 1755. Measuring frequency, wavelength, intensity, and waveform is hard work. Especially the implementation method of limited wishing technique is too complicated. Greet took the test 10 times and got different results every time. The instruments used by the Conjuration and Control Department to measure brain waves produce more messy waveforms than brain waves. The instruments used by the Conjuration and Evocation Departments to measure electromagnetic waves produce a mess that is even messy than that of a cat. The balls of yarn are miserable. Fortunately, the Confusion Control System has accumulated enough experience in this area. Whether it is wave measurement, filtering, or waveform analysis and calculation, we have made considerable achievements. With their preliminary research, when the Plastic Energy Department developed electromagnetic wave long-distance communication, they would not be faced with a huge pile of clutter and have a splitting headache and no way to start. And with their help, Gretel quickly got a slightly smaller mess. We still need to test a few more times. Mrs. Rosamond, the level 17 archmage who is responsible for calculating, sorting, and summarizing these waveforms, said in a low voice with a tired face. We need more test samples. Probably, preliminarily estimated that about 100 samples are needed to summarize the preliminary results. If you want more accurate results and can deduce the spell model, at least 500 to 1000 are needed. Gretel looked at her messy hair and the deep black eyes, and sighed. Female magicians of the enchantment and control department, even if they are purely research-oriented, their appearance is one variance lower than the average of the enchantment and control department, and they pay more attention to dressing up than magicians of other departments. Their daily grace is more pleasing to the eye than others. To be able to force her into such an unkempt appearance shows that the recent research pressure must have reached a certain level. You must know that even if the calculation work can be left to the tower spirit, deciding how to calculate, listing the calculation formulas, and making targeted adjustments, these tasks still have to be done by the magician himself. 100, 500 to 1000. He rubbed his temples. 50 eggs can be collected and conducted 50 times a month. Forget it, I'll use experimental materials from other magical creatures and do it together, that's it. Next to him, the Archmage of the Evocation Department, Philby's eldest disciple, curled his lips silently. We just have to work hard to polish the diamonds with our hands. A limited wish spell is a diamond, and 1,000 limited wish spells are 1,000 diamonds. Although there are already related magic arrays, after a lot of attempts, Master Nordmark found that the energy waves emitted by the magic array were too messy, affecting the experimental results. So, in the end, we still have to burn diamonds. When can the evocation magician stand up? When will it be cheaper and easier to get diamonds and other precious stones? It is said that the Department of Change is already researching it. It will be great when we can get results. At that time, the high-level mages of the evocation department will no longer have to go all the way to distant places for the request of their teachers or friends, banging, banging, banging all day long. Hard work is hard work, but you still have to do it. In 1 month, Gretel took out 50 fertilized eggs composed of human eggs and the sperm of the legendary mage. A fertilized egg composed of 50 dragon eggs and legendary dragon sperm. A fertilized egg composed of 100 dragon eggs and legendary dragon sperm. 800 fertilized eggs of various monsters. Evocation mages rubbed diamonds with their hands until they vomited blood. The magicians of the charm control department were so busy adjusting algorithms, calculating, checking, and revising that they vomited blood. What Greed has to do is observe, give feedback, observe again, and give feedback again. Limited wishing technique. Make a wish to help the fertilized egg in the test tube divide successfully. Every time it divides, the chromosomes, especially the extraordinary points, can be successfully replicated. Within 3 to 4 days, a cell cluster with 100 blastomers will naturally form. Enter blastocyst stage. Make a wish. During the activation of the wishing technique, the wavelength of the electromagnetic waves output to the fertilized egg should be frequency, intensity. During the silent chanting, the surrounding instruments buzzed, and the magicians all tensed up. 2 conjuration magicians, one on each side, lay beside the instrument and whispered. Recording energy fluctuations on site. Recording the energy output of the limited wish-making technique. The output seems to be smaller. 1% smaller? I seem to remember that the more accurate the conditions given by the limited wishing technique, the smaller the energy consumption. 1% cannot be considered a particularly large fluctuation, we still need to continue to observe. As a level 17 magician, Gretel completed 1,000 limited wish spells in 1 month, that is to say, more than 38 ring magic spells every day, which also made him very tired. However, after 30 days of high-intensity spell casting, high-intensity calculations, and adjusting the casting details based on the results of each calculation, the effect is still outstanding. After this round of spell casting and testing calculations, Mrs. Rosamond of the Charm Control Department came to Gretel with a tired look on her face. Her hair is a bit more messy than a month ago, with tangled hair sticking up in all directions, bags under her eyes drooping heavily, and 2 big dark circles under her eyes. We figured it out, on that face that was so haggard that it was almost dehydrated, Only one pair of eyes were bright, so bright that they sparkled. We synthesized 1,000 spellcasting processes and measured all the fluctuations. Using the fluctuations you cast for human legends as the standard, synthesize the fluctuations for dragon egg spells, and then refer to the fluctuations for other monster eggs. She handed over a piece of paper with a long list of numbers written on it, which was the serial number of the information stored in Talling. That's basically it. There are about 35 different waves, frequencies, strengths, and directions. I've recorded them here. As for how to build it into a magic dash, she smiled sweetly. I don't know that. It's up to you. Thank you. Leave it to me. Greet took out the piece of paper and left. Of course, it is impossible to calculate by yourself, and it is impossible for you to calculate by yourself in this life. From his previous life to this life, Greet's mathematical skills were only at this level. If he was asked to do the math by himself, he wouldn't be able to figure it out in 100 years. Fortunately, Gretel doesn't have to do the math himself. As a subject leader, he has a lot of subordinates at his disposal. Greet pulled out the data and immediately handed it over to two groups of people. One for the conjuration system and one for the evocation system. The requirements are exactly the same. They are to calculate a spell model for me, be able to release the wave described in the information, and also be able to sustain it for a long time without the caster being present all the time, and be able to adjust the intensity of the wave according to the situation. The conjuration system and the evocation system each have their own strengths in constructing magic. The two high-level mages accepted the task, went back and took their respective teams to calculate day and night for half a month, and finally figured it out. Mage Nordmark, the spell model you requested has arrived. Okay. I'll give it a try. If there's no problem, this is what I want, the way to help legend give birth to a child.